I get the privilege of now introducing my esteemed co-host of the Practical AI podcast, Chris Benson. He's a principal AI research engineer at Lockheed Martin. Welcome, Chris. Thank you. And Chris is going to close us out with his talk, and then we're going to be able to have some time where we actually can take some of your questions, like I said, and kind of tag team some of those together. So please keep those questions in mind. And yeah, Chris, on to you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Daniel. So let's see. We have the slide coming up here in a second. I thought, you've gotten tons and tons of great information today from the various speakers. I was just now learning from Daniel in this last talk, as everybody here was. And so I'm taking a slightly different attack, which probably won't surprise anyone that listens to the podcast. I'm fundamentally a fairly silly guy. I don't take myself too seriously. And Daniel asked me to kind of think about risks and opportunities. And I was thinking, like, what does that mean? Like, how do I want to do that? So I decided that most of my slides have like comic characters on them and stuff like that. So it's not the business-oriented slides that you probably see in the other presentations. And I'm just going to talk to the topic that each one is intended to represent. So as we dive into that, I kind of have risks. And when I hit risks, it's really like the bad news of today, and there's nothing in any of those slides that you don't already know. But I'm going to kind of call it out and contextualize it a little bit. And then at the end of that, then I will kind of go into the opportunity, which I kind of call the good news. And maybe we can get into some stuff that you find helpful, but I think it's really important if you're looking at opportunities and risks and how you're operating in that environment with both sides of that, how to move forward. So, and I'm hoping that maybe there's a moment or two where I'll ask for some call outs of some things, and it's perfectly fine to laugh at me, okay? Laughing is a good thing. It's late in the afternoon, and let's have a good time with this. So I don't have the remote. Do I need the remote? Oh, are you going to advance some? Oh, okay. Give me one. Huh? Oh, gotcha. Okay, let's see if this works. Maybe. There we go. Okay, so there's this podcast out there which I co-host with this guy that's really, really, really smart, and he lets me tag along. And so a few of you may have listened to that, and for some reason he invited me here. I happen to work for Lockheed Martin doing autonomy and AI, and that's a great passion of mine. I'll mention a little bit mostly in a non-Lockheed context shortly. Once upon a time, when a guy like me could actually be a chief scientist at somewhere because AI was such a tiny little thing that not that many people were doing it, I was allowed to do kind of a cool position at Honeywell and started their AI in the first division within the company that did it. And also, I like to always mention, because it actually does inform my stuff, I run a nonprofit that's an all-volunteer thing, has to do with animals. I'm a wildlife rehabber. And at some point in a different talk, I'll tell you why taking care of raccoons matters in an AI world and stuff, because the two inform each other from my perspective. So very different things thrown in the same pot together. I have my obligatory thing to keep me from getting fired every time I get up in front of people and say stupid things. Is none of this has anything to do with Lockheed Martin. Hopefully this is the last time I'll mention that company's name in the thing. So I have to say that to make sure that I stay in good stead. That paycheck is very important to me, and I get to do some pretty fun stuff there. So I think the reason Daniel asked me to hop up there is I'm going to cut to the chase. I think it's because I'm old, okay? Mid-50s, and I got introduced to this stuff way, way back. And while I was never anywhere near as good at it as Daniel is, early on, my parents both, back in the 80s and 90s, worked in AI of the day. We got a little history lesson from Bill earlier. They were doing that. So in the early 90s, that was dinner table talk for us. So I got brought into it really early, software and AI and stuff. So I'm going to give a little perspective, and that's part of what today is about. So the bad news, the risks. This is the stuff you already know. Bear with me as we get through it. I know you were asked earlier about whether you are on the hype side or not hype side, and my answer to Bill's question earlier is really both. Amazing, amazing technology, but yeah, a lot of hypey stuff in there. You've probably seen these Gartner hype cycle charts. Drive us nuts, especially when you're trying to be a responsible podcast host. We're trying to get to that good practical stuff and get, kind of avoid the hypey things. And so it's a big challenge if you're in business to how are you going to do something that's really valuable and actually doesn't get caught up in that? Because sometimes it's really hard to tell the difference. We struggle to tell the difference sometimes as things are coming out. So this is me a lot of the time. I'm that lady right there. We will get hit up all the time with people saying, "Hey, we have the greatest thing in the world," and stuff like that. And I know for me, I'm like, "Oh God." But you're going to read those emails because just periodically, we'll get that a little bit later, you get some amazing people doing amazing stuff out there if you can just get through the hype. So first bit of advice there is endure the hype because you get a gold nugget from time to time, and it is worth doing that. So I know for a while, this was one of those things. It was chatbots everywhere, just chatbots. What are we doing with building a chatbot? You are the 5,632nd person that has told me they're building the world's greatest chatbot. And I'm like, don't tell me that anymore. So we're trying to find that. And so I think to some degree, and there's a both good and a bad. We're hearing that on the hype cycle. I don't know if you've looked at Gartner lately, but agents are right at the top. So if you go back to Daniel's talk, there's some amazing stuff that you can do with agents. The hard part is figuring out, how do I take this new technology that's at the top of the hype cycle and people are saying crazy stuff about it and make it useful for my organization? How do I actually navigate that and separate that out? I want to start off and just get this clear because this is probably the hypiest thing that we've had overall in terms of the risks and how do I deal with that? Do I wait to make a product? And I get asked this all the time. AGI, who cares? Okay, just put it out of your mind. Doesn't matter. Maybe we get there someday. If you're thinking about business, first thing from a risk standpoint, throw it out. Doesn't matter. We're going to talk about what you should be doing in terms of thinking about how to do something of value for your company. So we have all these other things that are external inputs into how we're thinking and how we're planning around our business. One is regulation, the legal structure around it, and it varies wildly. So you have GDPR, which is kind of that first major stab in Europe at putting some regulation in place. It definitely did change the landscape for what it addressed there, but it's not enough. It's one of those situations where, I now have to think about this in Europe, this in the US, although we are, and it changes by administration. If you go back on check a few of our episodes, we've had some very different US regulation episodes on how that is. We did one recently about America's AI Action Plan, which is, I think the summary of that was a little bit aspirational. There was a whole bunch of things in the US that the current administration wants to do, but none of them have come to pass yet. And so we'll wait and see how that affects that. And so I think one of the things I know from my standpoint is, as we're looking at how to produce value in companies, I would like to get to a point where we're not kind of swinging by administration. And that kind of calls out the fact that, the obvious thing, the elephant in the room, is that no matter which side of the aisle you're on, this is the most divisive moment in US politics that we've had since the US Civil War. So that makes it, why am I bringing that up here? That makes it really hard to make decisions about what your priorities are going to be and how you're going to formulate strategy going forward in terms of what is a right thing. Because there are, if you look at this administration, the last administration, there were very distinctive policy differences in how they approached it, and that affects your business. And so it's another one of those challenges there. But you know what? It's not limited to us alone. We have all these things around the world that care about. Certainly in my line of business at that company I'm not going to mention again, things like invasions of your neighboring country and stuff matter in terms of how you're going to make decisions. I know in my industry that I'm coming from, it has been a learning process of seeing what happens in real life when you apply these new technologies that we're all here for today. What changes, what gets accelerated, what gets dropped. A huge learning opportunity there in an otherwise just horrible, horrible, horrible situation. We have others out there in the world that are also kind of challenging, in terms of pushing out, maybe saying, hey, I want to take an island back, or I want to kind of dominate the economics of a whole part of the world, and that's another thing. And there are both downsides and good sides to that in terms of opportunities. The fundamental aspect here is that if you look back to our entire lifetime, the post-World War II effort, there's been this notion of increasing globalization up until recent years. And for a long time, that was considered to be very good. And there are a lot of fantastic things about globalization. I tend to be very pro-globalization myself. It lowers barriers, it increases trade. The problem is, in the way that it was happening, is that there are big winners and there are big losers. And so if you look at the AI space today, who are the winners? Some of these big cloud providers are big winners. And the divide between those who have and those who have not is bigger than it's ever been before. And that also changes. It changes what kinds of tooling are available, what's out there in the news, what kinds of, how people are thinking about new technologies, because it tends to dominate the headspace around that. So that's really important to recognize when you're looking at making decisions for your business and you're doing it in this context of what's happening out there. You have to think about the people who are getting the media. What are they after? What are they trying to do? Because that plays a big role in how you formulate strategy. So one of the biggest challenges as we move forward is the notion of, probably everyone here is watching the news, job market's pretty tough. There's talks of some big layoffs coming out there, but in general, if you were to just look at what's happened so far, not much new hiring, not a lot of layoffs and stuff, but not a lot of new hiring. Part of that is that people are kind of holding their breath. All these other factors that we've talked about, the politics, they're kind of waiting to see how things are going to move forward at this point. And they're trying to understand with, going back to the hype thing with Gen AI, where can I use Gen AI? Where can I use agents? Where can I use all of these other tools in the toolkits effectively in the business, and what is too hypey, and how does that affect my employees? We've seen all sorts of use cases where you're kind of going, well, can I use this new tooling? Do I need to hire somebody to do that? Or if I put the tooling in place, do I now need to hire people around that? These are big question marks that remain unanswered at this point. Folks like Daniel and the other speakers that are here have helped us navigate through some of those choices, but that's not easy. We talk about it quite a lot on the podcast simply because the answers are not clear. So it raises one of the questions as you think about your business going forward that this is kind of me finishing up on the risk side. But I would postulate that the single biggest challenge that we have in the 21st century, above all, and we have a lot of challenges, is we've always measured people by their productivity. And so if you think about, how we value them, how we compensate people, it's based on what they've done. But as we look at models that are working with humans, in some cases replacing humans, that matters for your long-term business strategy in terms of how you want to think about positioning different technologies and integrating that into your workforce, which is somewhat frightened at this point because everybody has the same thought. So I think from my standpoint, I bring it up today because it would be a little bit disingenuous to talk about the technology without talking about the concerns people have when they're trying to run a business. So That is something that we are going to have to figure out in the days ahead. And so now that I've really, really depressed everybody with this and talked about future, I want to talk about the other side of the coin. And hopefully I can raise you out of the deep funk that I've placed you all in. And maybe we can find some silver lining on this. So first of all, people are afraid in this environment about failure. And I think it's really crucial that you recognize that we're in a moment of dynamic change. I'll talk a little bit about that more in a minute. But with failure, it'll come out next week. But we had a guest on that I don't want to do a reveal yet. We talked to a guest yesterday for the podcast, and this particular guest talked about 4 years that it took before they found their feet in their business. And they kept adjusting and pivoting. And as I was sitting there talking to that person with Daniel, I was like, this is like the most inspiring thing. They kept pivoting and they finally found it. So I would urge you to not let failure get in the way. Recognize sometimes you hit the ground, bounce off of it when it happens, but recognize that a new moment can always happen. And we'll talk a little bit about that, I think, there we go, as we hit the good news here. So there's a lot of good news. Homer knows there's a lot of good news. I know there's a lot of good news. Hopefully, after listening to some of these speakers today, everyone here is recognizing there's a lot of good news. There's a ton of opportunity here. So maybe some of that will pull us out of the funk that I just described. Things are changing at light speed. We are in hyperspace right now. It is going so fast and it is speeding up. And so the things that you have always known to be true don't really count for your decision about tomorrow, because the things that you've been counting on, the education you had maybe some years ago when you were at university, a lot of that is moving so fast up this exponential chart that I would say the first thing to do if you want opportunity is to open your mind to new ways of thinking and redefine what you think the things that you want to solve are. The things that might, we've all heard the term of, like blue ocean versus red and whether you're competing. Well, I would argue that there's a whole bunch of competitive markets out there that might have looked like red ocean before, but with the new technologies here, suddenly you have an opportunity to completely redefine how an entire segment of industry is operating. So we're at this amazing moment where you can go do something that's truly great. And the key is stay right on that change curve, which takes a lot of effort. We are creatures of habit. It's so easy to get kind of complacent. I know that I'm 55, and I find that the other people that are my age in industry that I'm working with, they have a habit of they settled a bit. They've kind of gotten like, oh, I'm a middle manager, I'm a senior manager, that kind of stuff. And, and those people, when they walk into a room full of younger people at their company, and all those people are reporting up to them and stuff, but they don't really know what's going on anymore. And so one of the things I try to do is this isn't just for the kids. This isn't just for the youngsters. If you're my age or older than my age, that's for you too. This is to keep us all relevant and able to make giant change going forward. That's a hard thing to do. So do it every day. You need to wake up and think, I'm going to take the world on in a new way. I'm lucky I have Daniel Whitenack who keeps me on my toes. And he always knows it's amazing. So I'm very privileged to have a podcast partner that I know that I'm on my toes because I have to keep up with this guy. And so that's a big thing. So focus on the practical. That's why we named the podcast what it is, Practical AI. Focus on the practical, and in doing that, get to work. Because we just talked about hyperspace a minute ago, so you got to get moving very quickly. But right now, going back to the last talk, you just saw, the toolkit that we have for this stuff is amazing. You have more opportunity with these tools, and it's not just agents, and it's not just Gen AI, but it's all the different types of models and software artifacts that you can put together to make truly, completely novel solutions. And in a lot of cases, novel solutions to problems that other people thought were solved. Going back to what I said a moment ago, you can redefine the world right now. We're at a moment where you can do that. So the question there is, what are you going to do to create your sustainable competitive advantage? And I know we talked about this in yesterday's episode. It's one of the benefits of doing your presentation the night before you actually give it, is that you can actually incorporate that recent stuff into it. So sustainable competitive advantage is available to you in areas that maybe it wasn't a year ago. Solve your customers' killer pain points. And the way that you're solving them today with agents and with the fact that you have different models available, open systems, may be very different. It may turn that red ocean back into blue ocean that we talked about. So opportunities are coming up that are not just new ones, but the old ones are circling back around. Mr. Jobs said it very well. Start with your customer experience. One of the things that our guest from yesterday, which was really top of mind as I was putting this together, mentioned is that this person had been doing solutions for guests where they'd run for 6 months on working on a solution, and then they go out and put it out there, and nobody would use it. It wasn't there. And this particular person reminded me that you have to keep going back to your customer and understand their world. Understand that the blue ocean that is available now, it was a red ocean yesterday, and now it's blue because you have new ways of finding that. So pop that, understand their need, understand all the approaches, do your research. How can you solve their need with the toolbox you have today? Get to the benefits so that you understand what the benefits of each approach are, and then understand what the competition of that are. A lot of times you'll find that the competition of yesterday is fallen away because your toolbox is so much better than it used to be, and then iterate on that. So you want to keep finding product fit to create new value. And you want to do that over, and what was working yesterday may not work for today. You have a new product fit that you got to find today, and it's going to happen tomorrow because we talked about time is going faster and faster and faster at this point, that hyperspace. So you're going to have to keep going back to find the value in the product fit. But that's okay because you're nimble, you're moving quickly, you're thinking about new things, you're not getting stuck in the way the problem used to be defined. And so tomorrow's value, you'll find it. Few things that I wanted to point out that I think are really important to get to a good, as you're building solutions out, is I personally believe in not building on some other cloud system that has a strong bias in models and has a particular API, and they may or may not do something in that API that runs you out of your business. I've seen that so many times. So there is a very strong reason to have your workloads inside your own facility, to be able to understand your security posture, your compliance, your observability. Make sure your API and your data stay in bounds. That's incredibly valuable. Everyone, the notion here of data is the new oil that we've all heard a million times and stuff. It's still true, and you want to have a model agnostic platform. So there might be a company here at this particular event that does this kind of stuff, is all I want to say. Finally, learning culture. This goes back to all of the things that we talked about, is that if your company is going to stay relevant and you want to be able to do all these things that we just talked about and stay on top and re-finding that value proposition over and over again, build a learning culture. Every time you crater, you feel like you're hitting that failure mode and everything, this is going to save your butt. And it doesn't matter if somebody is just straight out of school and they're young, or if they're my age or older, this is the way that you keep relevant and keep building your business going forward. Recruit the best people you can find and train the best people that you already have. Great solutions are available to you because think of all the models that are out there on Hugging Face, all these open models that are available to you now. I mentioned earlier about we don't care about AGI. What we care about is the fact that if you can identify the specifics of what you're trying to solve for, then you can find models that do each of those things and in a novel way, put them together on behalf of your customer and solve their problem in a totally new way. And this is constantly being refreshed. So you have new opportunities to find innovation all the way through the process. Just as something that I always like to urge people to do, this is mainly me for fun, is I think that physical AI is the next great frontier. I'm biased because of the kinds of things that I do for a living and the things that are really my passion. I honestly don't think that this particular picture is representative of what that will look like. I think it's, we all have the vacuum cleaners in our homes right now, but you'll end up having many, many potential things in your life, both personal and business, where you can bring software, hardware, models, agents. You're at the edge, you're using the cloud, you're using all these capabilities to build amazing solutions. So that's what I want to do. So I'm going to finish up with Just Do It. And as I finish up here, the thing I wanted to share is what Just Do It means to me, to make it real. So I'm preaching something that I believe in to my core. We had an episode not long ago where Daniel and I both gotten to do this, where we kind of go into our passion areas, and this was my passion episode. I absolutely, completely obsess, both whether it's professionally or in my personal life, about physical AI and the ways that you can affect we humans. And we are not digital, we are all analog. How do you affect humans in the real world in a real way? And that problem statement, I will leave it I won't read it all just to spare you, but that's the problem statement that I'm attacking. And I'm attacking that not just in a professional way, I'm attacking that in all aspects of my life. And nobody in the world has ever achieved that at this point in time. So that's how I want to change the world. It's probably not the right thing for each of you, but you probably have something that you can get just as passionate about as I do about that. And so I would urge you to find that, look at what your customers need relating to that, and go for it. Because we live, despite all that difficult stuff, in the most dynamic moment in human history right now. The things that are possible right now eclipses all the bad stuff in the news. It eclipses all the bad stuff I talked about at the beginning of the talk. This is an amazing moment. There has never been this moment before. So my question is, what are you going to do about it? Because if you don't do anything, it's just a failure of imagination. What do your customers need from you? What does your organization need from you? Use your imagination and be bold and follow all these great, you've gotten so much good advice today from the speakers. There's all this great stuff you can roll in. So go do it. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Awesome. I'm inspired. You could see why I keep Chris in my life, because he always gives me that energy to keep going and just do it. So really, really amazing talk. Now we're just gonna kind of open it up to questions. Ask whatever you want, and we'll either answer it poorly or well. Yep.
First, thank you. This is great. This is awesome. But just to bring it back to Indiana, there's a couple macro questions I want to ask. All right. But first off, I love the idea of the Silicon Prairie, but that's not what we're building. We're building the hard tech corridor. So Indiana is much more friendly to big business than it is to startups, as is 50 different states having regulations around AI versus a federal law on AI. And when you look at the K through 12 education space, Jasper County, which is the most rural county in the Midwest, has Conmigo in 95% of their classrooms. Hamilton County, which is reputed to have some of the best education in the Midwest, doesn't even talk about AI other than don't use it. So I don't find that most of the people I run into are afraid their job's going to get replaced. I find they've toyed around with Chat GPT and don't think AI is going to do much. Meanwhile, Ohio just had 600 people at their marketing AI summit, and they're growing fast. So how do we catch Indiana up?
Thanks. Yeah, I can give a thought, and Chris might have some ideas also from the context of Georgia or other places. I think, just by way of example, there is this. There are bright spots in terms of so if we look to something like some of the industry academic partnerships that's happening at Purdue, specifically around kind of with Lilly and other businesses like that. Part of the bright spot is we do have some good industry partners in the sense that Lilly, I think, was voted the most AI ready company in the world or something like that. So there's good examples there, but I don't think, to your point, it's filtering down into the education side. And still, I see at the university level, even though there's great industry academic partnership around these things, in the actual classroom level, there's still a lot of resistance to the technology. And I think that some of this is unavoidable, and part of it is because the technical side of education had to deal with certain pieces of this, and those are the ones that I see are more receptive, like the math and science side, because they already went through us not having calculators, and now we have calculators. So no one's going to be able to do mental math and like other technologies like that. But now this is influencing HR, it's influencing business, it's influencing the liberal arts, right? And those folks are really coming to a reckoning there. And so, yeah, I think that there does need to be kind of reform and incentive around that. And I think it was, I forget if it's just before now or after, there is a whole data science run by the state, data science summit that's happening for K through 12 folks here in Indianapolis to really wrestle with the topic of how do we bring kind of the data science topics to K through 12. I think it's a very challenging problem, but I think it's something we sort of have to lean into. But yeah, I think that we're not there yet, but there's some hope gradually bubbling up. Chris, any thoughts?
I think that the thing that I would add is the fact that if nothing happens, like, you've got a lot of great suggestions from Daniel here, but if nothing happens, then competition will end up driving that. What'll happen is that you'll see places that are having these, develop, and they're having AI capable tools, are going to start winning business, and things will go ahead, and those that are not doing things will struggle, as that goes away. And it may not be on the timeline everyone's expecting. You mentioned that people are using it but not really seeing it yet. But I think if you were to look at the history just of the last few years in the news, the way we're perceiving AI at the large is definitely progressed in the general population, and I think that's because of competition and because some organizations, some jurisdictions are driving in that, and they go, "Hey, this is working for us in some ways," and there are stumbles. So it's one of those things where if you don't do the things that Daniel suggested, the pain will increase over time, that competition there, and that'll drive it. So I think it depends on how you want to get there. You can either proactively do it and get education on board and make the changes you need to do, or you can wait a while and go, "Ooh, wow, this is kind of hurting," and then get there. But what I at least believe is it's going to happen. It's going to have to happen because of competition.
False. Other questions?
Yeah, just it's probably more of a question for Chris, but how are you keeping up? So I'm later in my career as well, right? And when I was younger, having the ability to dig into information and this just fire hose was exciting, and I'd work all the time. But I like to do woodworking now and things like that too. So how are you keeping up? How are you staying passionate about this topic?
So a couple of things. Number one is I did the thing that I'm saying don't do for a while. There was a point probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago now, where I was that manager and I was and I remember I walked into a room one day and I had all these really bright younger people than me that were talking through stuff, and I was struggling to follow. And I had always prided myself at the time on being a software developer. Like, no matter what my title was, I'm a software developer at heart. And I was struggling. And it was like no one knew. It was just me. But I felt humiliated inside that I was struggling with that. And I thought, this is something I want to know, and I need to not follow that kind of apathetic course that I see so many of my age peers doing. And so I just decided that I'm going to look at the world I'm going to like recognize, I'm going to look at the world optimistically, but realistically, and I'm going to dive into it, because then, you have the rest of your life, and why let that go? So that was one thing. Another thing is, it's easy to get burned out on that fire hose. And so for me, I mentioned at the very beginning when I was doing my intro that I do this nonprofit. It's as far from technology as you can possibly be. It's literally dealing with wild animals and things through our nonprofit. It's all volunteer. I don't get paid a dime for it, but that refreshes. It gives you a focus on something that's not about the fire hose, and it lets you kind of do that. And then when you go back to the fire hose, you're like, come on, bring it on. I'm ready and everything. So finding a balance. I've also really, really, really learned to appreciate my family in that way. And my family also knows that I have to go back and forth, just like all of us do, in balancing work-life constraints. So find something that's interesting to you, that really speaks to you. And that can be, for those of us in the room here, that may be AI or related things, but it can be other stuff too. But I think it's really important. And I also notice that people who do what I'm saying stay cognitively sharp. They're right there. The ones that let it go, there's a slow, you can kind of detect it over time. They're not using their brain in an intense way. So it's whatever gets you excited and gets you using your brain. And like I picked the hardest damn thing that I could come up with. And that if you read the thing that I said I'm passionate about, everyone talks about swarming. Nobody in the world is really doing swarming, not the way I'm defining it according to that definition. And there's some of us across companies that are recognizing that, and I'm trying to solve that. And that's really hard. That's usually something that people think of as a younger person doing. But I want to solve that problem. And so that keeps me engaged. So find your own thing in that way. So I hope that helps a little bit.
I think, is it me? Okay. Yeah.
Hey, sorry, I'm trying to figure out where
Thanks, Chris. Awesome presentation. This was a great time. Really informational. So I am not an engineer. I'm not a data scientist. I'm a CPA. I work in like an audit role. But 2 years ago, I started vibe coding, and I've managed to build some RPA tools, both for my day job as well as some freelance stuff. I hear strong opinions on both sides, like vibe coding is dangerous because there's not governance, but I love the citizen developer concept. And so what are your thoughts on that? Is the future reside with the citizen developer concept, or is it still like more traditional engineering? And then how can I position myself for success given that I don't have a traditional engineering or data science background?
So a great question, and I doubt you'll be surprised. I'm going to say I span both sides of, I'm not firmly on one or the other in that way. So in one side, I love vibe coding because it's democratized, and I really believe in democratizing and opening up skills so that people can do exactly what you're doing. And I love the fact that you're willing to dive into that and do that. But it's also on a curve, and like recognizing that there are criticisms where like, how robust is my software? Is it following things that are widely understood as being good software practices? It gives you an opportunity to say, hey, I just did something productive, but it can be better, and do that. So I don't usually use the phrase vibe coding for myself. I usually think of it as the modern version of peer programming. It's just the peer that you're working with happens to be automation. But when I'm doing it, because I use these tools every day, and I'm programming myself every day, but I don't outsource the stuff to it. I have a career, I've learned all this good stuff, I can accelerate that with these tools, but I'm going to go back and I take responsibility for what the tool is putting out, and that gives me the burden of saying, stay with it, stay on top of things and do that while still getting the acceleration. So, take both sides, like take it for the good, but also hold yourself responsible, and you develop and get better at doing that to make the good tools you're making now great tools.
Yeah, and I would just say too, because you have that domain knowledge in a certain domain, that is the key advantage in terms of building these AI systems. And so I think what's exciting is that, similar to what Chris was saying earlier with our guest earlier in the week, you can quickly develop prototypes, know, oh, I need this integration. I clearly need to do this. I clearly need to do that, because you understand the domain, you understand what needs to happen. Now, you build out that prototype quickly, people like it or they don't like it, but you haven't invested a lot, right? So you throw it away or you keep it. And if it turns into something and it starts scaling, it's going to break because it's 5 coded. But if it's turning into something and it's scaling, you're making money off of it, or you're leveraging it in some other way. And you can actually put the effort and resources into stabilizing it or refactor or whatever. But it gives you that quick iteration. And I would just focus on infusing as much of your domain knowledge into that as possible. Yeah.
Thanks. Maybe a question for both of you. You talked a little bit about agency in your presentations, but how are you thinking about identity of agents and managing that from an infrastructure perspective?
Yeah, I think this is a really challenging area that's, I think, very gray right now. I do think that part of the advice that has been kind of passed down by OWASP and others is that you should understand and limit the scope of your agent, and that somehow kind of defines an identity along with the kind of specific role-based access control that you give to it. I think the other way is kind of, I guess it gets more to the scope, but the behavioral side of that scope and what you expect it to do and what you don't expect it to do. I think this gets much more complicated, though, as you have replicas of these agents and you have kind of agent-to-agent systems that can interact with each other. That almost gets to kind of Chris's world of these various agents interacting with one another. And what is actually the right level of identity? Is that the individual agent, or is that the swarm, or is that the system? I think a lot of those questions are honestly pretty gray right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that I think scope is a really important word for defining identity on that, and that scope can vary depending on what you're trying to do. But you could think, for me, when I think about swarms and stuff, you could talk about the specific tasks that a given participant in the swarm, a platform, is doing, and dividing that up by scope. And then there's the collaboration between different participants, but I keep that narrow as well on a per agent basis, so that as different collaborations are happening, the type of collaboration is narrowly scoped, and there may be many agents that are managing that. So that's how I approach it, is kind of many jobs that are narrowly scoped and defined based on where they are in their hierarchy.
Hey, Adam. Good to see you.
All right, this was going to be for Dan first, but Chris, you can answer as well. All right, so team rituals learning around this. You're building a platform. You got to make trade-offs. There's going to be some tech debt and things like that. Do you have a heuristic for your team or kind of a ritual on the learning side, staying up to date in such a quickly changing field, and then how you kind of practice integrating those learnings into your platform as rapidly as possible?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'm also curious to hear Chris's response. But yeah, I would say on our team, it's still a learning process, just because, as Chris said, things are moving so quickly. But I think the things that have been useful for us, which we don't always get right, to be clear, but sometimes we do, and we've learned when we integrate them, it does help, is really being demo focused, and to say, well, it's great to think about all of the ideas that we could do, and that's cool, but if we really want to talk about something like who's going to create the demo, and then because then you get an actual intuition of how hard a thing is, and how it might fit in, even though, like you say, there's probably tech debt associated with that. But I think you could recognize that at that time and recognize those challenges. So really being kind of demo driven. And I think for our team, I've been really excited just to, it's been really encouraging for me to see that as I step back and let creativity flow through the team, there's much better solutions that they come up with if they do feel that we as a team want to lean into the rapid cycle of innovation rather than be guarded from it, to stay focused. So making sure that, like, when someone shares a link to something, it's cool to just pause and start talking about that internally and spitball. And, often that will kind of result in an idea or result in at least some shared knowledge amongst the team. It's hard to do remote. I think I'm very happy that our team is at least a good portion in person, where some of those conversations can be spontaneous, but it is a challenge remote as well. Chris, any thoughts?
Yeah, it's funny. Without getting into specifics, my day job, I ran into a situation where that became quite an issue in terms of like getting to prototype or demo very quickly versus taking on a certain amount of tech debt. And it's a really hard question to answer. It's a really difficult thing. And, after all these years that we've been doing software and stuff, it's still really hard. I think I really try to focus on what the implications of tech debt that I'll accept are for the purpose of expediency and getting to demo and stuff. But there are times where I will say, well, I can get there really fast here. If I want to do it the way I want to do it, it's out here, and maybe I'm trying to find some sort of middle ground on this. But it kind of depends. Like if you have to get to demo to get in the business, then that changes the nature of it. It may be that you're trying to get to a demo so that you can perpetuate your business. And that's really, really important. And I would take more tech debt on that than I would otherwise. But sometimes you can get yourself in a position where you get to demo fairly quickly, and then it's almost like starting over from scratch to get to the next step beyond that and kind of get back on track. So it's not just a technical consideration. It's also a business cycle consideration about what you can do. So I don't have, I'm kind of giving you the contextual framework that I use versus an answer, because I don't really think there is a clean answer on that. It just depends on how you can do it. I'm also incidentally in a moment right now where I've just proposed a demo where I'm having to make some of these same decisions, and it's just killing me in terms of speed versus and scope versus what I want in the end. So I'm in the same boat.